say 45 minutes? For those on live stream, we're just waiting a moment for the speaker. It's too cold to ski. To ski. It's too cold. Yeah, this is true. Nobody said he's going skiing. It's too cold to ski. They said Thursday, 37. We're going to have a heat wave. We're going above zero, yeah. We're going to have a heat wave. You're right. Not to worry, we'll complain in August. Okay. Okay. So, good morning, everybody. I see we had a lot of people that registered for this morning, but I know it's really freezing. So, hopefully you are all on our live stream and will still be able to enjoy this wonderful presentation and learn a lot. So, it is my pleasure to introduce Lee Gordon, who is the co-founder of Hand in Hand Center for Jewish Arab Education in Israel, an Israeli nonprofit organization that has created a network of integrated public schools serving Arab and Jewish children. Starting with just 50 children in 1998, Hand in Hand now has 7 campuses with over 2,000 Jewish and Arab students attending and is making a growing impact on Israel for Jewish-Arab partnership and coexistence. Lee is a native of Portland, Oregon, and lived for 20 years in Israel, where he received a master's degree in social work from the Hebrew University and graduated from the Mandel Institute's School for Educational Leadership. His years of involvement in the peace movement in Israel, as well as Jewish, Arab, and Israeli-Palestinian dialogue, work-propelled has him to establish Hand in Hand, and in 1999 to create American Friends of Hand in Hand, a nonprofit American organization supporting the organization's work in Israel, of which Lee serves as executive director. While in Portland, Lee served for 3 years on the board of the Jewish Federation. He is an active member of Congregation Chevra Shalom. He now lives in Portland with his wife and his children and is director of the American Friends of Hand in Hand. And he actually told me this morning, as I apologize for this weather, that he was enjoying it because he's not used to this type of a winter. So I now turn the mic over to Lee Gordon.
I mean, if I speak without the mic, can you hear me? Or you prefer? Oh, and on the Zoom, of course. Okay. Boker Tov, Shalom. I have a very crooked smile. I've told people 25 years ago, I had a cancerous tumor right on my facial nerve, right on this side, and they had to yank the tumor out. And this is a true story. I was in the hospital, and a close friend, as I was coming out of surgery, was there. And he said, Lee, it really took a lot of nerve what you did. And so I'm Jewish. I live in Portland. I spent 20 years in Jerusalem. Before that, I lived on a kibbutz called Ein HaMifratz in the north of Haifa. Before that, I was in Israel for a year of high school. When I moved there, the thing that I got most connected with was trying to build bridges between Arabs in Israel and Jews in Israel. I mean, some of you will know this, but 22% of Israeli citizens are Palestinian Arabs. And even though the conflict inside of Israel between Palestinians and Jews is not as severe or as dramatic as the conflict between Israel and Hamas or what's happening in the West Bank. There's a conflict nonetheless. But the thing, unfortunately, that characterizes the relationship between Jews and Arabs in Israel more than anything else is separation. Not enough opportunities for Jews and Arabs to meet each other. There are places in hospitals where there are more and more Arab doctors, but the average Israeli Jew has never really deeply encountered or had a deep interaction with Arabs. The school system is the most separate. So since 1948, there was an Arab track, schools that were, the curriculum was in Arabic for Arabs only, and a Jewish track, and on the Jewish side there are secular schools, modern Orthodox schools, and the ultra-Orthodox schools, which are quasi-public, and the main reason the Orthodox parties want to be in the government is to try to get funding for their schools. But even in places where Jews and Arabs live in the same community, like in Jaffa, Haifa, Tel Aviv, Akko, Upper Nazareth, Ramleh, Lud, lots of places, even when Jews and Arabs are living in the same neighborhood, sometimes in the same apartment building, they go to separate schools. And our belief is that one of the things that helps perpetuate this conflict, it's much more complicated than that, but one of the things that perpetuates it is this separation. If Jewish and Arab kids go to separate schools, then Jews go into the army for 2 to 3 years, sometimes more. It's that much harder for them to make contact and build partnership afterwards. So in the 1997, I joined forces with an Arab colleague. He grew up in a village in the north of Israel, a village called Mukeble, which is near Afula, very close to the Green Line. And I came to him with this idea of building an Arab Jewish school. I needed an Arab partner to do this with, and he told me a story that the first time he met a Jew, and he said it in Hebrew, Begova Einayim, was when he was 19 years old, and he came to Hebrew University, and he felt very inadequate. His Hebrew wasn't great. He'd never met Jews before, and he said, I don't want my son, who at the time was 4 years old, to wait until he's 19 to meet Jews and feel equal. And his son was in our very first class. In 1998, he started kindergarten and went all the way through high school. He's now a high-tech cybersecurity person, speaks fluent Hebrew, Arabic, and English. So Amin really felt that this was a project for him right away. We spent the better part of 4 or 5 months between November of 1997 to March of 1998 trying to really evaluate where we wanted to open the schools. We both lived in Jerusalem, so we knew we wanted to have a model there, but we were worried that if that doesn't succeed, we would need a backup model. And we spent a lot of time in the north, particularly in the Galilee, and almost every person we spoke to after we presented this idea said, this is a crazy idea and it'll never work. People said, Jewish and Arab parents will never send their kids to an integrated school because there's too much fear, ignorance, history of conflict, stereotyping, they just won't do it. A few people said, it's a crazy idea and it probably won't work, but you should try it anyway. And we were both very naive, and I like to say that sometimes being naive is good, because if you're not naive and you're cynical is kind of the opposite of being naive, you just, well, that's not worth it, I'm not going to try it, and you just don't do anything to change things. This process culminated in September of 1998 when we opened a kindergarten class in Jerusalem. We only had 25 students. We were given space inside of an existing school and a first grade class. Okay, perfect. Okay, here, I'll go on this other side. Give me a moment here. And we started a first grade class in the Galilee. Those were our two schools, not very auspicious beginnings for schools with just 52, 53 students. The model was that as those kindergartners move up one grade into first grade, we'll have a new kindergarten class. And as the first graders move up to second grade, we'll have a new first grade class. And we grew that way. But at the beginning, it was like us asking parents who didn't know how to swim to jump into a swimming pool in the middle of the night, because we really couldn't promise them. All we could say to them was, if you don't like what we're doing, you can always take your child out and send them to your neighborhood school. We made a lot of mistakes, and it was trial and error, but our schools grew. We opened a third school in 2003 in an Arab village, a village called Kfar Kara, or Kufar Kara in Arabic. It's in the Wadi Ara region, roughly halfway between Haifa and Tel Aviv. It's the only place in Israel where Jewish students are going into an Arab community to go to school. And when we started there, we started with 103 students from kindergarten through third grade, so it was a really big jump. Then we opened a fourth school in Haifa where we started with 18 two-year-olds. We started also expanding our schools down to the preschool level. In Haifa, we're now up to ninth grade. Every year we've added a grade and went from 18 toddlers to about close to 400 students today. The schools are completely bilingual, so students are learning in Arabic and learning in Hebrew and becoming quite fluent in both languages. Hebrew is the dominant language in Israel. Most Israeli Jews do not speak Arabic. Most Israeli Arabs do speak Hebrew. So Hebrew still is dominant in the schools, but we have Jewish kids who are really conversant and fluent in Arabic. And then in third grade, all of our students start learning English. So if you walked into a junior high or high school classroom, you could speak with the kids in English, Hebrew, or Arabic. When you walk into the classroom, you don't know who's Arab and who's Jewish. The only uniform that we have, and this is mostly in most schools now, is there's a t-shirt, any color t-shirt, with the logo and emblem of our school. And you'll see on these brochures over here, we have this kind of flying bird emblem. When you hear their names, you know who's Hebrew. You know who Musa is Arab, and you know who Avi is Jewish, and Ibrahim is Arabic, and Yael is Jewish, and Hanin or Faten are Arabic names. Most of the Arab kids in our school come from Muslim background, and there's a real spectrum. You may have kids who, most of the Muslim kids will fast during Ramadan, but at home the parents might drink alcohol or never go to a mosque. But we have Christian Arab students in 5 of our 6 schools. They're the minority of the 3 religious groups, and so we had to decide what kind of school week do we have. Well, some people say, well, let's have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off. Friday is the Arab Sabbath. Saturday is Shabbat. Sunday is Yom Rishon, is a day of church. And we said, well, we can't have a 4-day week. We have to have a 5-day week. So our school week is Sunday through Thursday, which is typical now of most Jewish schools. You'll see in our school parents who are working class, parents who are middle class, parents who are very political, parents who really are not interested in politics. One thing that we knew from the very beginning was that we would have to work harder to recruit Jewish families. Arabs in Israel as a minority that face quite a bit of discrimination, education for them is the most important vehicle for their kids to succeed. I mean, picture our grandparents' generation, my father's generation. My father immigrated from Lithuania to the US. Education was of paramount importance, especially when there was more anti-Semitism here. Jews in Israel have many more options. Jews are the majority. They can not necessarily take for granted, but they can take for granted that they're going to be all right in Israeli society. Jews do not need Arabic the way Arabs need Hebrew. Arabs need Hebrew because it's the language, the dominant language, the language of academia, the language of government, the language of commerce. So we always had a much larger group of Arabs who were coming to our school, and we have to work harder to bring Jews to the school. October 7th happened 2.5 years ago. Even though our schools were not near Gaza and they weren't impacted, there was really direct impact in other ways. One of our graduates of our Jerusalem school, a Jewish graduate who was called back into Miluim, into Israeli reserve duty, he was killed in Gaza in January of 2024. There was an incident in which a house that was blown up fell and 20 soldiers were killed in that one incident. You may have heard of the hostage Hirsch Goldberg Paulin. He was kidnapped at the Nova Music Festival, taken to Gaza, and then murdered a year later. His first cousins are students at our school. The grandmother of a student at our school in Haifa was murdered on her kibbutz, Kibbutz Be'eri, which lost about 12 to 15% of its members. She was a peace activist. And about 150 of our Arab families have relatives in Gaza, many of whom have been killed, houses destroyed. So in our school, it impacts everybody. I mean, as you know, in Israel, there's really not even 1 degree of separation. I'm sure that everybody in Israel, everybody, knows somebody who was killed or knows of someone who was killed or wounded. Our schools dealt with this in a very, very different way. So first of all, after October 7th, all the schools in Israel were closed for 2 to 3 weeks because there was still rocket fire and missile attacks coming from Gaza, from Hamas and Islamic Jihad. And most schools don't have big miklatim, don't have big safe rooms, bomb shelters. When schools started to reopen, we thought a large number of our students, especially on the Jewish side, that the parents would simply take them out of the school, especially new parents. They might have thought, well, maybe many of the Arabs there support Hamas or something like that. We had 1,900 students in that school year, 23, 24. Only 10 students didn't come back to class. And then about a month later, 5 of them came back. So we had 5 students who dropped out of 1,900. Last school year, 24, 25, we thought there would be a drop in registration, and we grew. And we grew again this year. I like to say that if Hand in Hand had been founded in 2023, we would not have survived October 7th. But we have had more than a 25-year foundation of knowing how to deal with difference, knowing how to deal with conflict. And I'll give you some examples of how we do that. So one of the sort of pieces of the educational culture we have in our school is that whenever students, parents, or staff are talking about issues that are conflictual, they do that in a way that everybody has to listen compassionately to what someone else is saying, and then they have to listen to you. And that the goal is not to win the argument, but it's to have your opinion, your narrative, your positions understood. It's done by, first of all, when we have parents coming together, we usually have an Arab and a Jewish facilitator, and they're pretty strict in the guidelines. Everybody sits in a circle to start with, and we do what we call in Hebrew a sevev, a round robin. No one can speak a second time and everybody's spoken a first time, and you speak about yourself, not you Arabs think this way, or you Jews think this way, but I feel like this, or I'm in pain because of this, or I have a family member who was impacted. And everybody listens. And it is harder for us to do it with the parents. The kids, this is their normal. They usually start at our school in preschool, kindergarten, or first grade, so they grow up with this, and it's easier for them. Parents didn't go to school together. There weren't integrated schools then, and they don't see each other every day. But I'll give you an example of how even among parents who've known each other, when this happens, when this kind of thing happens, and this is the fourth war between Israel and Hamas since Hand in Hand has been founded. This is 1,000 times worse, of course, but we've had experience. So in November, after the schools reopened in 2023, there were probably more parents' meetings. They were meeting every week. And most of the parents came at all of our schools. And in Jerusalem, one of my young colleagues, who's a staff member but also has 3 children at our Jerusalem school, she told me this story that there was a round robin, and then the facilitator says, now you can have some interaction between the people. And a Jewish mom who was sitting across from someone she knew, an Arab mom, she said, after October 7th, I was waiting for your phone call, and you didn't call me. And the Arab mom, and this is in Hebrew, and the Arab mom said, well, but I assumed that you would have known that I condemn what Hamas did. But at that moment, she literally stopped, and she got up, and she said, I'm sorry, I needed to have called you, and they hugged each other. So even among friends, things can slip between the cracks. There are many of our younger parents that were called up to Miluim. There were many of our older parents that had friends. There were many of our older parents that have children that are in the army. And there were many of our Arab parents who had relatives, distant relatives in Gaza. When this woman in Kibbutz Be'eri was murdered by Hamas on October 7th, the parents, the son and his wife sat Shiva at their apartment in Haifa. The grandchildren were young. And a group of Arab parents said, well, we want to go pay our respects, but we don't know if we'll be welcome. And they called up one of them and asked and spoke with the wife and said, can we come? And she said, of course, you're our friends, come. And about 30 Arab parents from our Haifa school went to sit Shiva with this family. And many of them said this is the first time they were ever in a mourning place with Jews. And some of them said, it's very similar to what we do as Muslims. Although generally in a Muslim, I've been to some Muslim memorials, and usually the men sit in a circle and the women sit in a circle. Unfortunately, outside of Hand in Hand, things aren't as rosy as this. October 7th pushed Arabs and Jews farther apart. Many people who were part of a vision of peace, said, well, we can't make peace now. Our schools are clearly, peace is not breaking out because of Hand in Hand. We have 2,100 students in a country that now is 10 million. Israel has a population of a little bit over 10 million now. When I first went there in 1972 as a teenager, there were 3.5 million people. Israel's grown a lot in 50 years. So if you look at 2,100 students in a country that maybe, I'm estimating, has 1.8 million children under the age of 18, you can say you're a drop in the bucket. If you're a little bit of an optimist, and I'm a cautious optimist, you can say you started with 50 kids, everybody said it was impossible, you've grown 40 times, and if some of you have heard of the anthropologist Margaret Mead, she says, never doubt that a small group of committed people can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. If you look at the American civil rights movement, it was a small number of people who were out demonstrating in the South, and it had huge impact. The anti-Vietnam War movement in the 1960s was very small comparatively, but it helped push toward the end of the war. Small groups of people can do a lot. What we believe is we're creating a model of what we think Israel can and should look like, a model in which its citizens, Arabs and Jews, can live equally, maintain their identities and their respective communities, but live equally and also share, find common ground in work, in education, in social life. And we're growing. We have a waiting list. We doubled the size of our preschool in Haifa. There's a large real estate company in Boston, the Krupp Family Foundation, and they gave us a very, very big grant, which enabled us to renovate a building. So we were able to double the size of our preschool. We added 80 children this school year, which then means that there'll be more kids going into elementary school, more in junior high, more into high school. Lots of challenges. Israel's a very divided country between right and left, between religious and secular, between Arabs and Jews. We're existing in that environment. We get funding from the Israeli government from the Ministry of Education, and the way we've done that primarily is working with the professionals in the ministry. Most work of government is done by professionals, not by the politicians. Politicians do set policies and can dictate a lot, but as you know, in Israel, politicians come and go. We've had many different prime ministers, many different ministers of education, but I'll give you an example of how Hand in Hand crosses a lot of party lines. 10 or so years ago, there was a minister of education named Gideon Sa'ar, and he is from the right, from the Likud. He's now part of Netanyahu's cabinet. When he was minister of education, he came to our Jerusalem school with the then Speaker of the Knesset, Speaker of the Parliament, a man named Reuven Rivlin, who later became president, and an Arab member of Knesset named Ahmad Tibi, whose daughter was in our school. And the joke was that if you could get these three politicians to come together, then you can do anything, and you can build 20 schools. Anyway, they came, and Gideon Sa'ar, while he was there, had a whole entourage of his whole pamulia, you say? Pamalia. And he had one of his aides, and he whispered something to his aide, and his aide went out and came back 20 years and whispered to him, and he said, I just got you another teaching position. So this is a right-wing minister who I think very genuinely liked what we were doing, because he felt like, I'm the minister of education for all Israelis, not just the Jewish ones. Many years later, Naftali Bennett, who before he became prime minister for a short time, was minister of education. He's a very right-wing guy, but he's a decent guy. He's not under indictment like our current prime minister is with 10 counts of bribery or whatever. And he also, I think, genuinely liked what we're doing. AIPAC has brought 2 congressional delegations to visit our school, and J Street has brought 3 congressional delegations. So we cross a lot of party lines, and I think that's really important because even though parents have to be open-minded enough to send their kids to our school, when you come to a parents' meeting and you see there's a lot of disagreement, we realize we're not just preaching to the converted or preaching to the choir. There's still a lot of work. There are some people in Israel that would never send their kids to our school but like what we're doing. There are others that would never send their kids and they hate our school, and I'll give you some examples. Over the years in Jerusalem, we've had right-wing, usually young people, extremists, spray paint on the walls of the school. And you know, in Jerusalem, all of the buildings the facade is Jerusalem stone. It's kind of limestone. And they've spray painted things that usually in Hebrew that say Mavet la'aravim, death to Arabs, Ein du kiyum im sartan, there's no coexistence with cancer. And to clean off spray paint on a stone building, you have to come and sandblast it. The worst incident was 11 years ago in November of 2024 on a Saturday night, the Saturday after Thanksgiving here. 3 young men spray painted on the walls and set fire to our school. They were caught on video. They went to jail. It did a lot of damage in the first grade classrooms. The kids would leave their backpacks, their yalkutim, and they made a bonfire with these, and they burned. And so that night, the next day was a school day. About 300 parents and the teenagers, the high school students, came to the school, and they fixed up the high school classrooms so the first graders could learn in the high school classrooms. And for 6 or 7 weeks, while they were repairing the damage, the high schoolers literally met in the hallway. And there was a young Arab mom. It was her first year. Her daughter was in preschool, and she came to help. But at the beginning of the evening, she was quoted as saying, "I'm here to help, but I'm taking my daughter out of school. I don't want her to be a target." At the end of the evening, she got so much support and felt so much solidarity. She said, "I'm staying here. There's nowhere else I want my daughter to be." The next morning, and I'm not exaggerating, there were about 1,000 people who came out of solidarity. The Minister of Education, a man at the time, I think his name was Shai Piron, a religious man, but very, very pluralistic and open-minded. The mayor of Jerusalem, the American ambassador to Israel, a man named Daniel Shapiro. This was Obama's ambassador to Israel. And they came out of solidarity, including a group of kids from a religious boys' school run by the Hartman Institute, if you've heard of the Hartman Institute. And they came with these signs that said, Tag Meir. And in Hebrew, many of these people who were attacking our school and other places, they would call themselves Tag Mechir, price tag attacks, meaning if you force us to leave our settlements in the West Bank, this is what's going to cost you. So a play on words, Tag Meir means a sign that lights up, Meir from the word or in Hebrew. Out of this, 2 of our 9th graders were chosen, and they went to the White House and were invited, and the Obamas used to do a Hanukkah party, sometimes 2 Hanukkah parties. And they went there as guests of the White House, and they brought a menorah with them, a Hanukkah, which was made by our young kids, and on the 8 candlestick holders, written in either Hebrew or Arabic, were words, peace, partnership, coexistence, tolerance, solidarity. And they literally brought that menorah and gave it as a gift to the Obamas and lit the candles, and they made a speech. The following Friday, which is not a school day, we had what we called a kind of a happening, not a protest. Our school in Jerusalem is on what used to be the old railroad tracks. It's now a promenade, and where people walk their dogs and go jogging, and it goes all the way down to the southern part of Jerusalem, and our school's quite big, and we had about 15,000 people that came walking along the promenade and then came into the courtyards of the school, and there was face painting and food and music, and there were a lot of television was there because this was a big deal, trying to burn a school down. The television news, one of the stations, interviewed 3 boys that were in 5th grade, and I think there were 2 Arabs and 1 Jew. And they were asking one of these boys who was an Arab, they said, "Well, why do you think these people set fire to your school?" And he said something like, "Well, they just don't believe that Jews and Arabs should go to school together." And then they said, "Well, what do you think they should do to them?" And he did not say, and excuse my language, he did not say they should beat the shit out of them or send them to jail. He said they should make them come and work in our school, and they would learn maybe that what we're doing is a good thing. Now, I can't say for sure that he learned that empathy, even with someone that might hate him, from our school, but I think part of it is that. I think that our school is really teaching empathy, teaching dialogue, teaching critical thinking, teaching acceptance. The teachers in our school, perfect, thank you. This is maybe even stronger. I'll not speak as loud. In our live stream from all over the country, yes. In our younger grades, we have 2 teachers in each class, and they, for the most part, stick to their own language. Even though the Arab teachers speak pretty fluent Hebrew, the Jewish teachers speak some Arabic. You might think that teaching 2 teachers in a class makes it easier, even though our class size is already small. Our class sizes tend to be 25 students as opposed to 30 or 35 in other schools. When the 2 teachers teach together, they have to work a lot harder because they have to create some kind of common ground. They're not lead teacher and assistant teacher. Often the chemistry is really good between them. Sometimes they have to learn the chemistry. And one thing that's emphasized is that the teachers can show disagreement, not disagreement about classroom management. If there's a discipline problem, they have to be united, but they can show disagreement about things going on in the wider world. An Arab student might be more critical of the war in Gaza than the Jewish student, and I think that's kind of a modeling that shows that we can live with disagreement, learn to understand each other, maybe overcome that disagreement, and we want the kids to sort of learn that from the teachers. I was going to show this video and then maybe take questions and I can elaborate. This is a video, I think it's this one, of our youngest school, which is, I didn't tell you where we have schools. We have schools in the Galilee and Jerusalem, our first two schools, and we opened a third school in Wadi Ara, which is more of a regional school, a school in Haifa, in Jaffa, which is part of Tel Aviv, and a school next to Kfar Saba. Kfar Saba is northeast, very close to Tel Aviv. We try as much as possible to keep an even balance of Arabs and Jews and a gender balance between boys and girls. We have a larger waiting list on the Arab side than we do on the Jewish side. Only one of our schools so far goes through high school. That's in Jerusalem. In Haifa, so in Jerusalem we have preschoolers, 3-year-olds through 18-year-olds. In Haifa we've reached 9th grade. Next year 10th, 11th, and 12th. Junior high in Israel is 7th through 9th. In Jaffa, so far, we're a separate preschool and then an elementary school. In Jaffa, the school is called Kulna Yachad, and hopefully you'll visit. Kulna is the Arabic word for us, together, and Yachad means together. All of the schools are accredited, and we get some of our funding, as I mentioned, from the Ministry of Education, and then we raise a lot of money philanthropically for everything that's not covered by the ministry. Early childhood, community programs. And one thing I neglected to mention is that every place we have a school, we have a community organizer who organizes programming for the adults, and we have between 4,000 and 5,000 adults, parents and other adults in the community who come together sometimes regularly, sometimes semi-regularly for a wide range of programs. Sometimes it's related to the school, sometimes it's classes, sometimes we do something which we call madrasa, which is the word in Arabic for school, where we do online sort of textual learning, where we look at videos or stories or newspaper articles and discuss them. So it's a project that really goes well beyond the walls of the classroom. So this school is in Kfar Saba, and afterwards I'll tell you something about the principal there.
Me and you both are in the same class. I'm Jewish and Naya is Arabic, and I like to learn from my friends who are different from me. I like art, especially drawing. I like math because it's a lot of science and it's really interesting. This is our classroom. In our school, we celebrate Jewish and Arabic holidays. Sometimes in the holidays, we teach the younger kids. It's fun and I feel like older. This is where we do our morning circle. What's special at our school is that we both Arabic and Jewish learn together. I really like to learn Arabic because it's interesting and it's like a new language and I like to discover it.
Being part of an integrated bilingual school gives our students the opportunity to see the other as a partner and not as an enemy. In our school, we put emphasis on critical thinking. We allow our students to ask questions, explore in order to find themselves. Being part of this family fills me with joy, fills me with responsibility. I love coming here every morning to join these kids, to learn from them, to be part of this social revolution in order to make a better future.
I want to just tell you a quick story about Muhammad Kunduz. He's Palestinian Israeli, grew up in Jaffa. He's somewhat observant, and he does not look like what people have as a stereotype. He's got long hair, a beard, he looks kind of like a rock star. He grew up in Jaffa, you know, surrounded by Jews, but he really was kind of in a small, sheltered Arabic community. And he got a scholarship to go to Brandeis University. There's a philanthropist who also used to donate to Hand in Hand, who left a scholarship that every 2 years brings one Arab and one Jew to Israel for a full 4-year scholarship at Brandeis. And when he got to Brandeis, his first reaction was, I've never seen so many Jews in my life. Now, his grandfather had 8 or 9 or maybe even 10 siblings in Jaffa. And in 1948, when many of the Palestinians in Jaffa left, and you can argue whether they were kicked out or they left of their own volition, all of his grandfather's siblings, except for him, left and went to Gaza, just down the coast. His grandfather, and this is a story that he would tell Muhammad, his grandfather said, I stayed because it's my home and because of my Jewish neighbors. And Muhammad talks about how, in part, he's working for Hand in Hand in honor of his late grandfather. He's a musician, he's a virtuoso oud player. I've seen him play, he's really quite good. He writes music, he's been an actor and a filmmaker, and he's really a wonderful principal. One second. He is kind of like a philosopher and really talks about the power of education. He has some TED Talks, his English is fluent. So maybe I'll take some questions. Yes? What's your name?
I'm the cantor here.
Oh.
I'm Israeli by origin.
Okay.
I visit Israel often.
Yes.
I have 2 questions. The
Sure.
first is very simple. The other one may be a little more involved.
That's okay.
The first one is how do they... Oh, sorry. 2 questions. One is, how do the kids know English so well? Do they learn English in that school, or do they come from English-speaking homes?
Okay, and then the second one, I'll try to remember both of them.
So the second one is, you said that he is oh, that's a little too much. I just don't want it to be a problem. You said that he was a Palestinian from
Jaffa?
Jaffa. So how do you define the difference between what they call in Israel Israeli Arabs and Palestinians in places that are within Israel, not the West Bank, but like place like Jaffa that you call Arab, that he determines himself to be Palestinian?
Right. So the first question, the Jewish girl, her English, I believe that one of her parents is an English speaker, so that came from home. The other girl, Nai, and I learned this from her mom. Her mom is the director of our community programs. Her mom's English is not very good. She said that Nai actually started teaching herself English before she was in 3rd grade. She just decided, and she started watching YouTube videos. Most of our kids do really well in English. I mean, one thing we've learned is that from a lot of social, psychological research, developmental research, is that if you learn bilingually, it really helps you cognitively. I mean, I know there are some kids, parents of kids at Schechter schools. Being exposed to a second language can do a lot. Now, they were maybe chosen because their English was good and they were young. I think they were only in 4th grade in that movie, or maybe 5th grade. Most of our kids by 6th grade are speaking English pretty well. But that's also generally in Israel, and I think our schools, you know, we have a smaller class size and we have a really strong English program. The other question, so my philosophy is I never argue with how someone identifies themselves. Now, not all Arabs in Israel will identify as Palestinian, but a lot of Arabs in Israel will say, I am a Palestinian citizen of Israel. Now, sometimes that has a political connotation or a national connotation. You know, there used to be the Jews in the diaspora or even in Israel would say, well, these are Israeli Arabs and those are Palestinians. But in 1948, before the borders were formed, Palestinians were in that whole area. The area was mandatory Palestine. I mean, Jews said they lived in Palestine. I mean, if you were born in 1930 in that part of the world, your passport said Palestine. There even was the Palestine Education Funds, which is a Jewish organization that was sending money to help build the Jewish community there. In 1948, the borders were found. Part of the Palestinian people ended up in Israel. Some ended up outside, and there are Palestinians all over the world. They've had a very, very different history. Now, I'll give you an example. One of our former parents, his kids all went through our school in Jerusalem. He's a lawyer, Arab, works in the Israeli court system, lives in a Jewish neighborhood. And he says if you asked me to define this conflict in really easy terms, it would be that my people are at war with my country. His people he sees as the Palestinian people, but his country is Israel. Israeli citizen, he works in the court system, his Hebrew is as good as his Arabic. He's loyal, pays taxes, didn't serve in the army, wasn't drafted. I think for Arabs in Israel, it's a much more complicated thing. I mean, I went to Israel and became a citizen right away. Law of return as a Jew, I got support from the government. I did a short stint in the Israeli army. There are some Palestinians who are very, very political. Like there are some Arabs in Israel have made films, and they don't want their films to be called Israeli films. Now, they have a right to do that. I mean, but they're made in Israel. They say this is a Palestinian film. But, there's no Palestinian state, so what does that mean? Our students, their struggle is for equal rights in Israel. They're not, even if there was a peace treaty and there was a wonderful Palestinian state, they don't want to leave. They, as Israel has developed and gotten wealthier and more Western in many ways, Arabs have come up along, not at the same level, but, over half the new doctors in Israel are now Arab. The majority of pharmacists in Israel are Arab. When I went to Hebrew University, only about 6% of all university students were Arab, and now it's close to 20%, close to the numbers. But then there's a huge segment of the Arab community in Israel that's poor, heavily represented among poverty, high school dropout, criminal activity. Some of you may have heard there's lots and lots of violence in Arab communities, criminal violence, not directed at Jews, and that the Israeli government isn't doing enough to enforce it. Especially with our Minister of Police, who's extremist right-wing, Itamar Ben-Gvir. In our schools, you'll find people who will say, well, I'm a Palestinian. You'll others who say, oh, I'm just an Arab. If you're more Islamic, let's say, there's an Islamic movement in Israel who don't send their kids to our school, their primary identity is going to be as a Muslim. The way maybe in ultra-Orthodox communities, their primary identification is going to be as being Jewish. And, conservative and Reform Jews to them are not Jews. We're like heretics. I mean, they've tried to, sabotage, Reform synagogues in Israel. Kol HaShama, which is where I was a member. Complicated identities. Then there are people who are Mizrahim, who are really Mizrahi activists. And there are a small number of Jews in the world who might call themselves Arab Jews at one time, earlier on, but it doesn't really, so it's complicated. I hope that answers your question. Not perfectly, but.
A good answer is that it's complicated.
Right, exactly. Very complicated.
It's not easy to define the lines.
Exactly.
Yeah. But would you agree that it's a latent issue? It's a which? Latent. Like it happened, after the Intifadas, where mostly it was real Palestinian, perpetrators, then there were some Israeli Arab villages that uprised as well, and then the lines started to blur.
Right. You had a question here, yeah.
So it sounds like the families that send their children to these schools, it's voluntary. I'm wondering if you've noticed common strands as to why they want their children to go to these schools, and also how do you play up to that and publicize that, and also are the Palestinians who do send their children to these schools, or the Arabs that send their children to these schools, are they secular or are they observant, or what is the range?
So I think among the primary motivations on the Arab side, among them is a better education for their kids. Wanting their kids to learn Hebrew at a younger age, to be able to speak Hebrew without an Arab accent so they can sort of just feel completely comfortable. Smaller class size, more input. We have a bit more funding because we raise money. There's 3 languages taught, not just one. And openness, knowing that they're open to the idea of coming into and then there's sometimes motivation that we want to create a better society. On the Jewish side, partly getting a better education, but the Jews have more choices in terms of schools. There are some really good schools, although in Jerusalem, where the non-Orthodox Jewish population is the minority now, there are more Orthodox Jews, modern Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox than there are secular Jews. So there aren't as many choices of schools, but they have generally more choices than the Arabs do. So there maybe is a little bit more of a motivation, like, well, we really want a better society. I think after October 7th, there were a fair number of parents on both sides, but on the Jewish side, that said, we want a place where we can feel like we're doing something, because there's no peace movement, everything's falling apart. But there's a broad range. We have, as the schools have grown, we have working class parents who do not have college educations. We have professional parents. We have, on the Arab side, on the Muslim side, there are some who are more observant. During Ramadan, the majority of the students are fasting. But they, as I mentioned before, that the parents might drink alcohol at home and they may never go to a mosque. So there are many Jews who fast on Yom Kippur, but, drive to shul on Yom Kippur, right? You'll see in the schools quite a few of the Muslim moms, or some of the teachers wear a hijab, but I've also discovered that the hijab is not just religious, it's also cultural. It's a little bit of a cultural thing. But they'll, dress still modern, except we're wearing a hijab. There are others who you really can't tell if they're Arab or Jewish. So there's a diversity. Very observant Muslims are not sending their kids to our schools, and very observant Jews. We have a few kids in all our schools that wear kippot, but they'll define themselves as observant but not Orthodox. They may go to there's a growing number of conservative synagogues and quite a few Reform synagogues in Israel. They're not called Reform, they're called Yahadut Mitkademet, Progressive Judaism. The shul I belong to is called Kol HaNeshama, which is, the founding rabbi was a conservative rabbi from New York, Levi Kelman. So there's a variety, but there's still, the common denominator is everybody has to be open to the idea, but that doesn't mean they're not afraid. For many of the Jews, the parents have never met someone who's an Arab, so they're kind of jumping in, they're going out of their comfort zone, which I think is important. If you want to make change, you got to go out of your comfort zone a little bit. Oh yeah, tremendous amount. Birthday parties, sleepovers, play dates, and then when that happens, the parents get to know each other. And one of the things I mentioned about the parent, we have several thousand parents, is the parents' friendships sometimes are stronger than the kids' friendships because, parents don't see each other every week. The kids can, one week, hang out with one friend group, especially if they're young, and the next week they'll have a different group of friends. Some of the parents' friends they've been seeing each other and socializing way beyond when their kids are in our school. The kids have graduated, and that's really, really important for us. We sort of feel that we have to have a whole community component. Yes?
So I have two questions. First of all, for each Jewish applicant, how many Arab applicants are there, like the percentages?
I don't know for sure. I know that there has been a waiting list in most of our schools. I don't know how long, a waiting list on the Arab side. Sometimes a very small waiting list, but in the Galilee for several years, every Jew who applied, there was also an imbalance for a while. Now it's much more balanced, but there was an imbalance in the school that we had in the first grade. It was 2/3 or even 3/4 Arab and 1/3 Jewish. It's changed as the schools have grown and gotten more recognized. You've seen kids who have graduated. How do they do in their national tests? There aren't as many tests there as there are here in the States, but they do these tests, I think, in 5th grade and 7th grade. But there are more applicants on the Arab side. And it's also hard sometimes because if they're from a community, they know the teacher and they know the principal, and there used to be a lot of pressure on the principal, like, why didn't you accept my son? And so we've changed it a way that there's sort of like a separate committee, so the principal doesn't have to be the one to get all that pressure. And then your other question.
My other question is, I was listening to you and I heard you say that they define themselves as Arabs or Palestinian, but I didn't hear, I would say I'm an American Jew. So none define themselves as an Israeli Arab?
They'll say, yeah, some will say they're an Israeli Arab. I think some will say that I'm a Palestinian citizen of Israel. I think, yeah.
We're trying to get to one cohesive result where
Right.
we're all part of Israel, and I didn't see that too much in what you said, which brings me also to my next question about the curriculum in the school. And I'm trying to understand, do they sing Hatikva in the school?
I don't think they sing Hatikva, and our schools don't have a lot of flags. I mean, there was even an incident in the north where in the second year of the school, there was a very, one of the mitzpim of Mizgav, one of the small communities, sent in a complaint that your school doesn't have an Israeli flag, and then we found out that almost all the other schools don't have Israeli flags. It wasn't just our school, but it was, they don't sing Hatikva in the school because it's a Jewish anthem. I mean, it's a Jewish song. It's a Zionist melody, and we're not, I mean, even people like President Rivlin, who was a real fan of our school, he says, I'm not expecting the Palestinians to become Zionists. I'm expecting them to be part of Israeli society. I think that all of them in the school say, this is our country, like this guy says, but I'm also part of the Palestinian people, but this is my country. There are many people in our school that, on the Arab side, it was talked about having a national service, you know, that some of our girls don't go into the army, they do national service, and there was a group that said, we want to do national service together. So there's this commitment, they want to do something, but they said, we want to do it in our community, helping old people, or together as Jews and Arabs. So I think there's this feeling like we're here to stay. They've all of our students go off to university when they graduate, to one of the Israeli universities or colleges. But their identity can be very separate. I mean, I think that's just Israel's, it's different than the United States. We're a melting pot here. We're a melting pot. We weren't defined as there are some people who want us to be a Christian country. When we have people in the Republican Party that want us all to be Christian and white. It's challenging. I understand. I can see it's very challenging.
It's challenging because I feel like it's more of a disservice to Israeli kids, moving them farther from allegiance to Israel. Because if they don't sing Hatikva and they don't have the Israeli flag, and I'm assuming, I don't know, do you celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut or
definitely,
not?
Definitely.
Definitely. So
I can tell you
I
about
just
that.
feel like I don't see it so much as a melting pot as more, and I applaud that. As an academic institution, I think it's wonderful, and I think I hear you talking about testing and them doing very, very well, which is wonderful. Less I see it as a melting pot. I see it more as an opportunity for I don't know how to define, Arab, Palestinian, which is wonderful. I see it less as an opportunity to get to the result where we're all hoping for in the end.
So I think, first of all, I think that we talk about shared society, Chevra Meshutefet, Ezrachut Meshutefet. But what is that? Ezrachut doesn't necessarily. I think that right now you have a situation where 80% of the country, or a large majority of that 80%, is alienated from 20% of the country, and 20% is alienated. I think that, in our synagogue, for example, we don't have an American flag or an Israeli flag. Flags are just a symbol. It's what you do in life that's much more important. So our Jewish students mostly go into the army. There are some who've done national service. They go in for 2 years or 3 years. Some of them served in Miluim. Arabs aren't drafted. I think that how you live your life is much more important than a song. Hatikva is a song. I don't think that most Israelis, do they feel proud when they're singing Israel? Some do. Some do, and some don't. Half the country's out in the streets demonstrating against the other half of the country. Is that unity? It's like not unity. Arabs and
disagreement, but there's still unity. I think, but
it depends on how you look at it. So I'm trying to explain it this way. I think that the 20% of the Israeli citizens that are Arab, I want them to be part of society, and I want the other part of society to recognize them. And the way to make them part of society is not for them to go against their identity, but for them to learn. When we talk in groups, the Jews talk about their family members who died in the Holocaust. They talk about family members on Yom Ha'atzmaut, where we do a ceremony in the morning, at 11 o'clock in the morning. And then they also talk about things that happened with their grandparents who didn't leave Jaffa and things like that. They're all Israeli citizens. They all carry Israeli passports. They all speak Hebrew. They all work in, and we have kids who are also speaking Arabic and understanding. It's not perfect. It's not perfect. I personally don't like flags because I think flags, I don't like the fact that every politician here has to put on an American flag. They say, I'm more patriotic. It's what you do. You can be really patriotic, but then want to cut funding to children or whatever, or you want to, go and invade, pick up, immigrants off the street and abduct them. Is that patriotic? No, I think patriotism is building life together, ongoing. you know, for what you do, not just day 1, day 2, but day 10,000, you know, Hatikva is not sung because it's, you know, we believe in returning to our homeland. You know, if there was peace and there was whatever, you know, and, you know, the ultra-Orthodox don't sing Hatikva either. They're not part of society. I would like them to be drafted and also be part of society. I understand your dissonance, and there's dissonance. It's not for everybody. I agree. I understand that.
So I have actually a comment and a question, but start with the point is it's complicated. It's always a good answer. But the comment is, I think that, yes, a lot of people see the Tikva as a statement. But in addition to that, it's basically an anthem. Put aside the wording of it or the melody, it's an anthem that basically says we are all under this country and this is the song that was chosen to describe or to identify this country. So it's complicated again. But going to my question, you said that basically this program is running 20 plus years already.
27 years.
So you already have graduates that are outside of the system. Is there any place that you are tracking what's happening with these people, the students that basically go through the system and eventually get this new curriculum and this relationship on the Jewish as well as on the Arab side as to what happened with them?
Right.
Is there any tracking?
So we're doing some tracking. We haven't done really, really serious research, like longitudinal research, where we look 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. But we know that about 60% of our graduates come to some of our activities. Some come to a lot. We have about 1,300, 1,400 graduates from our high school, from our elementary schools. We have a big, robust alumni program for graduates. We have a staff member, a young woman, former parrot, a woman named Zohar Shachar, Jewish woman from Wadi Ara. She's in charge of our alumni programming. So part of it's social, giving them a place to come together. Part of it is helping them do various projects. What we haven't done yet is this research that looks at, are you involved in promoting Jewish-Arab relations as adults? We know what kind of careers. We know that almost all of our graduates go either to one of the colleges or to university. So they do advanced degrees in a broad variety of fields, in medicine and law and business, some in the arts. I know one graduate who left Israel who's in New York, a Jewish man who studied, he's still living in New York. I don't know anybody else, it might be a few. Some of them are married and have like kids. We have a couple who came back as teachers. And many of them are just friends. They stayed friends from their college. But I don't know beyond that. I can't really tell you how many are really, really engaged and involved in continuing to build this. You know, they live all over Israel. Some of the Arabs live in Jewish neighborhoods. The middle son of my co-founder lives in Tel Aviv. He says he wants to be in a big, lively city. He has Jewish roommates, so he's like very much integrated in Jewish life, but he's also an Arab and speaks Arabic and comes home to Jerusalem where his family lives. What we also don't know is how many of the Jewish graduates who spoke fluent Arabic, are they losing some of that? I think most of them who came away pretty fluent, because they can read, they don't read Arabic as well as the Arabs read Hebrew. I know that the Arabs, many of them say their Hebrew is as strong or stronger than their Arabic. Like if you ask many of them, you ask them what they read, they usually say, I'll read books in Hebrew. And that's sort of sometimes to the chagrin of the Arab parents who wanted them to read poetry, and it's just that Hebrew is an easier language because you write it and speak it the same way. In Arabic, there's the fusha, which is the formal, and there's the spoken. So that in many ways, the Arabs are being integrated, in answer to your question, much more than the average Arab who goes to school and lives in their village. I mean, some of them go home to their village.
I have no doubt about that.
Yeah.
I have no
Right. No, I understand
I just
your...
feel that, I'll try and say it delicately, but
It's
I feel
okay.
like we have to cancel part of who we are in order to make this integration more possible. And that to me is very sad, because I would think that the least there would be an Israeli flag because we're in Israel. So your solution No.
you will notice that there's many Jewish
Your
schools.
solution is to say, no, I don't like flags. I'm not saying it's not it's a solution, but it's in my mind when
Right.
I heard about this program, and I was very happy about this initiative. I didn't think that part of Israel was blacked out to make this happen. And that to me is very sad, because that's not how I would have envisioned it. Maybe it will happen later. Maybe it's not even on the table, but I would expect a school in Israel to have an Israeli flag regardless. And that to me was a bit of a shock. Again, I'm very happy. I think everybody is entitled to the best education they can get, but I think that I would expect it to be different. That was a bit of a shock to me.
Okay. I mean, first of all, I understand that, and it's not. There are a lot of Jewish schools in Israel that don't have an Israeli flag. The ultra-Orthodox. I mean, in the
There are no Jewish schools in Israel that don't have it.
So in the Galilee, I don't know what now, but in the first year, when this person complained that we didn't have any flag, they went around and saw a number of schools that didn't have an Israeli flag. It could be that the current minister.
School in Israel, so I find that very hard to believe. The same way that there's an American flag in every school in the United States, I want to believe.
The school my kids went to in Portland did not have any flags. I mean, I think the problem with flags is you get caught up in what does a flag mean? Does it mean you agree with the government? Does it mean you?
Of course it does.
I understand that.
Country.
Yeah.
That's all it means, and each of us has a right to their own opinion and a right to, and not one thing that we do or believe in doesn't define who we are.
Right.
But at least we're all together under the flag, and we're allowed to be who we are.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I might disagree because I think that you can be together under many, many things, and a flag is one symbol, and a national anthem is one symbol. I mean, I think that here, for example, July 4th means going out and having a picnic. Does it mean remembering? It's I think that, at Memorial Day, does anybody remember soldiers who've been killed? We don't know. In Israel, we do Yom Ha'atzmaut, we do a ceremony, which is a little bit more than just a piece of cloth. It's talking about the war. It's talking about people who lost their lives in the war. It's recognizing, it's hearing from parents who come in or grandparents who come in. I mean, we don't really have any grandparents that were fighting in 1948. It was too many years ago, but we have grandparents who do have family members. We have this graduate who was killed. But it is very complicated, and I'm not saying, I mean, it could be that if I was there, I might want to have a flag, or I might want to have Hatikva. I've sung Hatikva. But I also think that it's what you do for many, many days and not just having a flag. I mean, that's a symbol. It's how you live your life. And first of all, I hope that when you go back to visit, you could come and you could ask those questions, and there would probably be some Jewish parents that would agree with you. I do know that one of the things that Jewish parents have said sometimes is, for the Arabs in our schools, sometimes being in our school is like compensation. Where outside they don't feel empowered, and in our schools they feel strong and equal. And when the Jewish parents feel like they have to be really sensitive, and they disagree with that. And then the Arabs say, well, speak your mind. So it's not like all the parents are all kumbaya, and all the parents on the Jewish side are left-wing and out at demonstrations, and some are and some are not. I don't think we have maybe any right-wing parents. We have a lot of centrist parents who are, and I can, if we have time, I don't know if you have the Wi-Fi here, but I want to show you a video that President Rivlin made for us, and he talks about this in sort of an interesting way. But more questions? Yes. Sorry.
I really am very interested in the follow-up. In the follow-up. We're talking about, after 27 years, you have these graduates. And I think it really is incumbent upon the organization to see where they are and what they're doing, not just from a professional point of view, but from an identification point of view. Have they carried this forward? I think theoretically, and I've always believed, unless people know other people, you can have hate. Once you know that you're a human being, some way hate gets dispelled. And I think that the goal is phenomenal. But I would really like to know what happens after graduation. I'm sure they're, again, professionally successful, but what do we carry forward? Because
Right.
if this is a seed that you plant and it grows a society that lives together, that's fabulous.
Right.
but I think we need to
So
know that.
two things. One thing we do know about is the parents who form bonds, those bonds still exist. We have this parent who's now not so young anymore who talks about how my people are at war with my country. He's still friends with the parents of his kids when they were in first grade, and his kids are now, his oldest is 30, and daughter is 28 or 27. So the parents have this connection, and we want to, the research we want to do, the more serious research, is not just to look at the kids who after they graduate, what the parents are doing, both quantitative, how many are coming to activities, how many are doing this, and qualitative, what are they doing, professionally, socially, politically, are they, when they go to university, are they still having relationships with Jewish and Arab students on campus? One thing I didn't mention is we started 2 programs, one at Hebrew University and this school year at Haifa University. The Hebrew University now, this is its 4th year. Every year we have a group of 20 students, half Arab, half Jewish. Only a minority graduates of Hand in Hand on purpose, and they do leadership development. They do volunteer work as pairs, an Arab and Jewish pair as role models that they can go volunteer as friends. And then they try to organize at least one or more programs on campus that try to invite Jewish and Arab students to come to, like usually an event of some kind. And then this year we started at Haifa University. It's a little easier at Haifa because about 30% of the students at Haifa University are Arab. And at Hebrew University it's more like 10 or 15%. So that's something we're doing smaller scale at that level. The research, we're just doing a little bit of it. We need to do a much more serious research, and there's a woman, a young American woman, that's her role, and she's trying to see where we can find some professors at one of the universities in the School of Education or whatever to do and to get some graduate students, because this could be a wonderful PhD project for many students to look at this. And we can get a little funding for it and do like a real longitudinal, where are they at today, where are they at tomorrow, what's the difference between those who graduate after high school, after elementary school, is there any difference between the cities they choose to live in, things like that. But we haven't gotten there yet. If I could look at do you have time for a short video? Yeah, it's, would I have to maybe?
You're on Wi-Fi, you just have to press it.
Okay, am I on the website here?
If it's asking for a password, it's really complicated. It's Temple123.
Don't know how to get into your. I got it. You might have to help me here. And will I have to come out of the screen?
No, but it's also, you know, it's like, there's a whole conversation about being an American Jew, and it's a complicated Arab Israeli. No, yeah. I agree with you about open schools.
What is it? 1, 2, 3, 4?
It's Temple123, very complicated.
Temple with the capital T? And where?
No, he's in.
He's in.
All lowercase?
Israeli Ministry of Education.
It's all lowercase?
Yes, it's not a Palestinian.
Hello, Mark.
Okay.
שלום. Hello. ומרחבה. מרחבה לשותפים של עמותת יד ביד. האווירה הציבורית בישראל בימים אלה מדגישה כל כך את חשיבות פעילותה של עמותת יד ביד. זו תקווה שפעילות העמותה תמשיך ותשגשג. בוגרי מסגרות יד ביד, יהודים וערבים, גדלים להיות מובילי שינוי והשפעה בחברה הישראלית. הם שגרירי אמת של ההבנה. ההבנה שלא נגזר עלינו לחיות יחד, אלא נועדנו לחיות יחד. אז תודה לכם. תודה לכם על פועלכם החשוב כל כך. וברכת בריאות, בריאות ושלום שלוחה לכם כולכם מירושלים.
For those, that was Reuven or Ruby Rivlin, who grew up in the Likud, but sort of an older, more moderate Likud, and he was Speaker of the Knesset, and then he became president. The Knesset elects the president. He became a really big fan of Hand in Hand, and after the school was torched, he invited all the first graders to come to his house, and there's this wonderful video of he's wearing a suit and his wife's sitting next to him in like sports clothes, and he's kind of giving this sort of speech, and his wife leans over to him and says, they really just want to have ice cream. Why don't you just stop talking and give them some ice cream? It was very cute. But there's one thing he said which I really liked, and that he said that Jews and Arabs weren't sentenced to live together, we were meant to live together. I kind of like that it's not like, there are some people that say, well, the Jews aren't going anywhere, the Arabs aren't going anywhere, we have to find it. And I say, here's an opportunity. It's difficult to kind of learn to live together, and it's challenging. And I agree with you; it's very challenging. And
I'm actually very struck by the fact that there are families that want to get educated together, and that gives me a lot of hope. Like during the 1970s, there was a desegregation push in America, and I was one of those kids. I was, they changed the school I was supposed to go to and whatever, and parents were afraid. There's a lot of fear involved, and even the kids, there was a lot of fear amongst the kids and a lot of violence too. Have they had any kind of violence? Has anything happened? I would think not, because these are families that want to be there.
Schools of choice.
Right. Right.
The difference here was that it was sort of forced busing, and the idea was good, but it wasn't well thought out, and it was often black kids were sent to a more affluent white community, and sometimes they did really well educationally. There are phenomena in Israel where Arabs in small villages, there are many Jewish high schools where they'll have a small number of Arab students because the parents think they're going to get a better education, which is true probably because the schools are better. But they're usually, socially, it's very difficult for them. I think the difference here is, black people and white people are not at war with each other. In Israel, Israelis and the wider Arab world is at war with each other, and there's terrorism, and there are attacks, and there are people in the Palestinian community that would like to see Israel destroyed. Not all, and not everybody in Gaza is a terrorist. There are some Israelis who believe that. And there are some Palestinians who think all the Jews are dangerous, but these are schools of choice, which I think is better. I don't know how you would do that on a societal level. I think that there are still at least 10 places in Israel. I mentioned these mixed cities. Ramla and Lud are very poor cities near the international airport, near Ben Gurion Airport. Akko is a city north of Haifa. There are no integrated schools there. I think these integrated schools would do, not just for the Jewish-Arab relations, they just help the community, with better education. Upper Nazareth, which started as a Jewish city, is now about 25-30% Arab. But yeah, I think you have to buy in, and if you get parents to buy into it, then it helps. Yeah.
I want to thank you very much. It's
Thank you.
complicated.
It's complicated, yes.
No two ways that it's not complicated, and I can't wait to hear the results that you come out with this. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have an article here from the New York Times and a brochure, and the brochure has our website and email address, so please take one as you go out, and it'd be great.
And I've gotten tons of comments that came through live
Oh,
stream.
good.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say, was what one of them said.